welcome to Linux Action News, our weekly take on Linux and the open source world. This is episode 3, recorded on May 28th, 2017. I'm Chris.
And I'm Joe.
Hello, Joe. Good to be with you again. And we have good news for XFCE users coming up later on in the show. But we should probably start with the worldwide global news from NextCloud.
Yeah, big news from NextCloud this week. Global Scale, which is their way of scaling NextCloud instances up to 300 million users was the quoted number. That's their kind of goal for this, which is a lofty ambition to say the least.
Yeah, it's obvious that NextCloud is going headforth, not only into enterprise, but at these numbers also, I would imagine, state installations. Now, they're doing this through a series of different technologies, basically things to break out different jobs and make NextCloud responsive across a network of systems. So using proxies and central database servers that are aware of which users are logged into which NextCloud servers and all kinds of things that increase scalability. And the interesting thing, Joe, is that while for you and I, this seems like a good thing for NextCloud to do, probably doesn't really matter to most of us that are just running NextCloud, say on a VPS or on our local network. But there is actually kind of a cool angle. This technology would also enable portability in like a NextCloud ecosystem. Ooh. And what I mean by that is you could have a series of service providers that are already starting to crop up. That could be at the ISP level, or it could be just something that you subscribe to online that's like hosted NextCloud. It does all of the things that NextCloud do, but they manage the NextCloud instance. But say you get annoyed with that provider, it could be possible to move your account and your data to a different NextCloud instance. So NextCloud becomes a sort of a neutral platform that different service providers spin up, and then you can move around as a consumer using some of these same technologies they're building to make NextCloud also massively scalable.
Yeah, what they're trying to do is leverage themselves into a position of being the standard, or at least a standard, which you can then move around, and it doesn't really matter where you're using it because it is just the standard way to do it.
I was having a good chat with Yas on episode 198 of Linux Unplugged. He's, works over at NextCloud. And you start to realize after talking with him pretty quickly that they're a non-trivial amount of work away from creating a Slack and Mastodon killer. And I don't toss that around lightly. But if you look at their federated technology and you extrapolate from there, and you make it possible to tag users across federated servers, and you add global directory servers that are aware of what servers are online and which users are logged into which of those, and you start giving people addressable addresses like @ChrisLAS across this federated server infrastructure, then you combine in their online collaborative editing, their already built-in existing file syncing and sharing services, their calendar and collaborative work, their notes system, and the apps that you can install, and the user data portability. What you got yourself here is a potential Mastodon Slack hybrid that is open source and user portable.
It sounds amazing, doesn't it? It sounds like it could be a killer of Mastodon, as you say, and Slack. But can I pour a bit of cold water on this, as usual?
Mm-hmm.
Should they not be thinking more about improving the core functionality first before they roll out all of these crazy new global scale federated systems? Do you know what I mean by that? Take, for example, when you send me the audio for this to do the edit of the show, you're going to send me it using Dropbox. And the question I have for you is why? Why not NextCloud?
So I think I would argue a bit with the premise. I think they are improving the core with each release. They're definitely making solid security improvements, and the upgrades seem to be getting better and better between releases. I would bet you that some of this is about replacing core infrastructure that needed to be reworked anyways. And so since they have to replace it, why not make it scale to infinity and beyond? And I think the reason why I don't use, say, their sync solution over Dropbox is twofold. Number one, I think the Dropbox CDNs are faster than anything I can implement, so you can pull it down and the other hosts I work with can pull down the files that I post up there super fast. Basically can saturate your connection wherever you're at in the world. And that's particularly nice for the type of workload that I'm doing. The second thing is that I really have no interest in managing an instance at this point, because I just want to share files that end up public anyways. I just want something that's exceedingly good at just moving those files, and I guess I said there was two things, but there's really three things. The software I use to record some of these shows natively integrates with Dropbox using their API and saves to Dropbox. That's its only save destination, as a matter of fact, which is incredible. And welcome
Incredibly
to
risky.
Yeah, and welcome
if
to
you ask
I mean,
me.
I would bail, right? It's not an irreplaceable piece of software, so that's why I use it. If it was something that was fundamentally irreplaceable, I would not use that. But because I'm going to publish it to you via Dropbox anyways, for now, it works. If that were to go away and I were to re-engineer a solution, NextCloud would be a serious consideration for me. I might also look at other things that are just pure file syncing, like C-file. So it just kind of depends on the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, what they need to improve massively is the document editing, the collaborative editing, because Google have just got that down so perfectly, as far as I can see. We're using it right now for the notes for this show. Google Docs in Drive is just perfect. It just works. It does everything I ever need it to do, auto saves, all the rest of it. Whereas with NextCloud, okay, it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet, is it?
I think I still prefer Google Docs myself for doing show notes that are, especially when you're live and you're on air. But I don't know, for an office where you have not exactly real-time collaboration, but you have Joe looks at it for 15 minutes and then Chris looks at it for another 15 minutes, a half hour later, and then we publish it on the intranet. For that kind of collaborative editing, or even like, we're all at a meeting, say Joe, Chris, and the Beard are all sitting around the Jupiter Broadcasting meeting table and we're all taking notes, I think it's fine for that kind of collaboration. We need to message, we need to be able to make corrections in real time while we're speaking on air. I think Google Docs has a leg up there. And the other place where Google Docs has a huge leg up is with the Google Apps package that they're so successfully selling to businesses, at least here in the States, and particularly to schools, because you buy that one package, and in case of the schools, you can even get in there for free. And you don't have to worry about hosting. You don't have to worry about infrastructure. You just get part of the Google Apps as part of your subscription, and that's why NextCloud has to work more and more on their scaling and on being available to service providers, so service providers can go into things like businesses and schools and sell a NextCloud solution. Because otherwise, the businesses are going to opt for the more sustainable, quote unquote, cheaper investment, which is right now Google Docs or Google Apps. That's really their competition, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, let's hope they can create this standard and we'll get these hosted solutions and it'll be really easy for people to use, and then they'll be using open source rather than evil Google. So from the future of file syncing to the past of init systems, Devuan has finally reached 1.0.0.
Right. And it's worth noting this is their LTS release based on Jessie, which is a bit ironic, but we'll get to that. This was something we talked about with RC2, just announced only 3 weeks ago, but they feel like there was no critical bugs that came up. And so for init freedom lovers out there, it's ready for a 1.0. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I installed it, and I also installed Debian Jessie, and both of them had XFCE on them, and I got them to be very, very similar. And so from a user's point of view, once you've got it installed, it's essentially the same operating system.
Yeah, I did the same thing, which is funny. I decided to do the same thing. And there is one major difference, and that's why I said there's good news for XFCE users, because Devuan doesn't give you the option to install GNOME 3. Let's just put it that way. So you get XFCE, you get LXDE, and you get Mate.
Well, I did it from the live CD, which was XFCE. So that was, when I heard that the live CD was XFCE, I thought, great, well, because that's what I use.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of seem like a good desktop. I was chewing this over though, and you know where I would totally use Devuan, not even as like a statement on systemd, but if I just had a production system in place, a server that I had reason to believe would have issues if it was upgraded to systemd, and I needed a direction to go, it'd be if I could overlay the Devuan packages, or if I could upgrade an existing Debian release to the Devuan Jessie 1.0 LTS, if I could do some sort of cross upgrade like that so I don't break my system and I can keep my existing installation patched, I could definitely see a use for this, sort of like in the past, I used to convert Red Hat enterprise servers to CentOS systems. And you would be, you got it down. Eventually, you just could replace the right packages, and then all of a sudden you could upgrade to the next CentOS release from the previous Red Hat enterprise release. Don't ever do what Chris does. If you could do something similar with Devuan and Debian, That might be nice for those that are actually worried about real world breakage. My personal opinion, though, is it's much more likely that there are way more GNOME 3 users out there that if they tried to upgrade to this would break their GNOME 3 desktops.
Yeah, because GNOME's got a load of dependencies on systemd, hasn't it? So that's why, presumably, it's not in Devuan.
And lognd specifically. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's all the irony in all of this is as they hit Jessie 1.0, we get an actual release date for Debian Stretch.
Yeah, which is going to be a few weeks' time. So they are almost a whole release behind now.
I mean, does that matter?
Probably for the kind of person who is going to use Devuan, probably not. But if you want to be stuck on an old 3 point something kernel and stuff, don't know really.
So Devuan is an interesting project that I feel like is under a particularly higher amount of scrutiny than other recent distros that have come up. And one of the things that did jump out at me, and I can't tell if this is just me being critical or if this is experience speaking, but in there, they talk about the reason it's good to release is because no critical bugs have been reported since the RC 3 weeks ago. But if you have a tiny user base...
yeah, that's not good potentially, is it? But you know what's funny about having Debian Jessie and Devuan Jessie on the same system? Which one do you think boots faster?
I guess I would have assumed the systemd one, but I don't know.
Yeah, but nope. Devuan booted much more quickly because I think it was it struggling to read one of my other partitions or something during boot, and so it just sort of froze a little bit.
I'm supposed to do something automatically with this, but I can't figure out what.
Yeah. And I hadn't done any FS tab stuff or anything like that. It was just all automatic. So it's supposedly systemd boots more quickly, but not in this case on my test machine. So there you go.
Well, Joe's porn stash aside, I have reason to believe systemd systems are supposed to boot faster.
Well, maybe. So let's talk about good news for Wimpy's favorite subject, VR.
Yes. SteamVR is now supposedly working under Linux. And now this is an update that was pushed out to Steam, and it's experimental at this point, and it also includes an update to SteamOS, more details in a second. And this is called SteamVR Home Support. It's a beta feature from Valve, which makes like some of the social stuff and the interactive launcher work. And if you combine it with the right base distribution, and I'll get to that more in a moment, you can actually get full Valve VR features under SteamOS or Linux. And I'm my body ready for this, Joe, because I preemptively bought the Vive hardware the moment they announced that they would be doing this, which is Vive is who Valve works with. And I got it all pretty much ready to go. Tried to set it up under multiple different distributions and hit different roadblocks depending on the distribution I tried. So having get this part down the road means that the setup experience should be a lot smoother, especially if you use the new SteamOS update.
But hang on, how's that going to work in the RV? You're going to be running into things left, right, and center trying to do VR.
Boom, pop, boom. It's worth it, Joe. No, I have it set up here in the studio living room. It's for the studio. It's not for me. It'll be like set up here for people to play around with when they visit JB1. And so this is like going to be like a big thing. I was going to get Wimpy in the VR headset here at the JP1 studio while he was out here for Linux Fest Northwest. But 3 different people took 3 different cracks at getting it working under Linux with very minimal results. And we were not satisfied with what we got, so we didn't bother because we thought if we gave Wimpy a bad showing, it would be worse than nothing at all. So we just put it back in the box and didn't bring it up.
This isn't particularly exciting news right now because it doesn't work that well. It sounds like it's very experimental. It's all kind of beta. But for me, why this is very important is it shows that Valve has not abandoned SteamOS. And again, you mentioned this update to the beta, Brewmaster Beta. It's had a huge update to the latest version of Debian Jessie and new kernel and all that kind of stuff. And it shows that Valve have not forgotten about SteamOS. And I wonder why that is. Is it because of Windows 10S maybe? Because that was the possibility that they created SteamOS as a hedge against, wasn't it? Because of the fact that if you get a Windows version that you can only install stuff from the store, then Valve loses their control with Steam to deliver the software to you.
When I heard that Windows S story and the fact that Windows S would be limited to a certain subset of apps from the Windows Store, in fact, now we've learned it's even more limited than we initially thought. Like the Windows Linux subsystem stuff will not be available from the App Store, even though it's in the Windows Store. When I first heard that story, my first thought was, this is exactly what Valve was worried about. And so I wouldn't say you're totally wrong. Having spoken with the gentleman at Dell who is responsible for Dell's Alienware Steam machine, which I think is officially the most successful Steam machine, if not unofficially the most successful Steam machine. And we asked them specifically, well, when are you guys going to update this thing again? Because it's been a couple of years. And Dell said, well, we're waiting for VR. We feel like when Valve nails VR in SteamOS, we're going to rev the hardware. And I bet you Dell's not the only hardware manufacturer thinking that. And so Valve does have a couple of hardware partners that are sufficiently happy with the sales to produce another unit. But they need a reason to put a GTX 1080 in there or something like that. My conversation with the guys at Dell were like, yeah, we put a GTX 1080 in this thing. But to tell you the truth, the majority of our customers are playing at 1080p. And a 960, an NVIDIA 960 does just fine when you're pushing 1080p. And then for our customers that are going to 4K, most of them know how to open up this machine and put a different video card in too. Like, it's just not huge yet. But if we could get 4K and SteamVR and all these different requirements, we'd be happy to rev another piece of hardware. So Valve might be readying the groundwork with these SteamOS updates, their quote-unquote biggest update ever for a new generation of Steam machines.
Well, let's hope so, because I would really like to see SteamOS do well and be a serious competitor to Windows, or at least maybe the Xbox and the PlayStation. It seems a bit ambitious, but I'd like to see Linux out there doing well in gaming and being taken seriously.
And you know, Joe, I actually had a conversation with a couple of different people who are like, I love PC games. If I could play it easier in my living room, I would totally do it. So maybe that's what they're gonna offer. So it's good to see this SteamOS update because it also includes some of the Vulkan drivers needed to make VR work, which is actually the trickiest part of getting VR to work under Linux right now. Is you have to get a particular version of the NVIDIA driver that has a particular build of Vulkan. It's the same version that a lot of distributions ship by default, but it's a different branch of the driver, and so it causes a lot of package conflicts. And so SteamOS is smoothing that out. And this is an example of where SteamOS allows Valve to sort of iron out some of those little bumps.
Yeah, and if they get it to the point where it is just an appliance that you can plug in and start using, because it's based on Linux, we're all going to benefit from that.
This episode of Linux Action News is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Go to DigitalOcean.com, create an account, and use our promo code Here's the Thing, and you get a $10 credit. You apply that to your account, create the $5 rig, run it 2 months for free, or run one of their hourly systems. When I was trying out that new NextCloud release, I spun it up on a DigitalOcean droplet, ran it for a little while, kicked the tires. I really enjoyed it. Joe, if memory serves, you got a couple of droplets yourself.
Yeah, I've been using DigitalOcean for quite a while now, and it's brilliant.
Maniac.
One thing I used it for was when I needed to get Late Night Linux onto Google Play podcasts. You can only do that from the States. So I thought, well, I could fire up a VPN or I could do something a bit more interesting. And so I fired up a droplet in New York, just the $5 one, installed X2Go, logged into it from my laptop, installed LXDE, browsed to the website, set everything up, and then destroyed the droplet. And guess how much it cost me?
6 cents, 7 cents, 8 cents, what?
1 cent.
You were quick too then. That's nice. Yeah, the hourly pricing's killer for that. I love it for trying out different open source projects. We have, right now, Joe and I are chatting over Mumble, and we have a Jupiter Broadcasting Mumble server that we use on Linux Unplugged, and we run that on a DigitalOcean droplet. One of the things I love about it is the performance is extremely respectable for wherever you're connecting in the world. But if you know where your users are going to be at, you can position using one of their worldwide data centers. They have them all over the world in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Toronto, Germany, India. They have them spinning up all the time. You might just want to go create a droplet next to Al and Jude. I know I do. DigitalOcean.com. Go over there, create an account. Also play around with their block storage. Just super sweet. You can go up to 16 terabytes. You can attach it to your device as block storage. Mess around with whatever file system you want or crazy LVM setup, DigitalOcean.com. It's a great place to learn and put things into production and experiment. Just use our promo code Here's the Thing at DigitalOcean.com. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring Linux Action News.
Well, we talked about Steam on Linux, and a great way to use that is on Solus. And this week, Solus have announced preliminary KDE Plasma support, something that Ike was very reluctant to do before. He said that they needed to have a maintainer for it, and it looks like they have found a maintainer, Peter O'Connor. And so it doesn't quite work yet. It's not officially supported, but it is coming very soon by the looks of things, that you'll be able to have a proper Plasma desktop on top of Solus, which is just going to increase their potential user base massively, because maybe you don't like GTK, maybe you're a KDE user, have been for a long time. Well, now, once this gets worked out and the bugs are squashed and it's all working, you'll be able to use Solus.
I like the way Ike wrote this post because he kind of gives the background on how this happened, and it makes a lot of sense. Essentially, there were big-ticket items that were using the KDE frameworks, like KDN Live and K3B, that they essentially needed somebody's help with anyways. And so Peter comes on. He seems to be pretty ambitious about this whole thing, and he acknowledges it's early days with this, but if the community works with him, I think you might end up finding the Plasma desktop being one of the premier desktops of Solus. And if they're going to continue to bring in more cute stuff too, why not have somebody that's on top of that? Now, he also broke out the whole team there of maintainers. Makes a lot of sense. As somebody who's running Plasma for a while, I was using it on Arch and Neon, and Solus would be a great addition to that. I mean, it seems like a great mix. And recently, Solus is one of the distributions that switched over to that NVIDIA driver that has the Vulkan support to make SteamVR work. So you can really get yourself a pretty nice setup going if you're a Plasma desktop user that wants some of the latest Steam stuff. And it could be just a great distribution for that class of user.
And I can't help but feel that Plasma is going to get more users very soon because of Ubuntu. It sounds a bit strange. You think, well, hang on, surely Ubuntu getting rid of Unity and going to GNOME is going to mean you're going to have more GNOME users. But the reality is that it's just not that good, GNOME. I mean, is that a controversial thing to say? It seems to be a bit crashy. You were talking about the OBS box crashing quite a lot, at least once a week.
And it's once a day, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I've realized it's much more often. In fact, I've now have multiple issues with it. Yeah, you're right. I was talking about that on User Error 10, and it is, if you want to know more, I did a little deep diving into what I consider some of the core performance issues with GNOME.
Yeah, and that's what got me thinking about it. The thing is that KDE Plasma has just got better and better and better over the last year or so. And every time I try it, it seems to just be better and more stable and run perfectly. And so it has me thinking that if you want a modern desktop, I love XFCE, I quite like Mate, but KDE, if you want something really modern, they really are pushing the boundaries. And Qt, to me, seems like a better long-term commitment if you're a developer, because GTK is just this constantly shifting goalposts.
I think GTK is getting there. I think they're about to announce, 4.0. They're working on a latest release. I think they're really getting there now with GTK. It's starting to calm down, so that criticism will be less of a concern as they land on that. I think the main attraction to GNOME is for people that are switching from Mac OS or Windows, where it's so noisy. There's so much stuff they're throwing at you. They're even now putting ads in your launcher. It's so much input to your brain. You just want to get your terminal and your text editor and your browser and have a clean environment. And GNOME is that. As much as I love Plasma, the reason why I actually switched back to the GNOME shell was 3.5 months and change into my Plasma 5 desktop re-experiment again. When I was really busy and really trying to rush, I found myself getting flustered on how to use the UI and where certain things were in Dolphin, or accidentally closing the wrong pane and still not picking up on some of the UI cues. And so I decided for my own work efficiency, it was faster if I just switched back to GNOME and ignored some of the surface level, obvious to see performance issues in trade-off for a more efficient workflow for me overall. I love Plasma. I think Kwin's great. I think the transition to Wayland, it's going to be even a stronger contender. But right now, UI-wise, GNOME feels like it gets out of my way more.
Well, I can't stand GNOME, I'm afraid. Whereas KDE, I've never been a massive fan at least, but it's growing on me. What can I say? And
Yeah.
this Solus thing gets me pretty excited. I think that
Are you considering trying it, Joe? Are you considering giving it a go?
I am considering it. Yeah, which
Whoa.
because the thing is, XFCE is well, as Ike described it, is basically dead technology. They're just about porting the panel to GTK 3 when GTK 4 is about to be released.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I have to think long term. And Mate is great, and that's my go-to apart from XFCE. But if you're going to move away from XFCE, why not look at all the options? And GNOME, I just do not like. And anything lighter like LXDE or LXQt, don't really like. So I'm thinking KDE might be worth a try. I mean, we'll see. We'll see whether I actually...
I'm fascinated by this. I would love to see if you tried it. I would love to hear how it goes. I thought it was pretty powerful, very stable for me, really reliable, good performance. KWin is butter smooth. I have nothing but positive things to say other than I found the UI options still overwhelming at the end of the day. And I just felt like I didn't want to feel like a dumbass when I was using my machine.
Well, what I really like about it is the configurability. I can make it act exactly like XFCE, essentially, only be based on modern technology.
Yeah, that is, you can definitely make it basically work like any desktop environment you want. That is one of the nice things about it. It sometimes leads to endless tinkering, but if you can set limits for yourself, it's a really nice setup.
Yeah, well, exactly. I wouldn't do that. I would just set it up as I have it set up now, which is basically like Windows XP, and then just leave it. Forget about it. Yeah.
And what would you run as the base OS, as the underlying distro?
Well, I've always been a fan of Ubuntu LTS as a base. It just seems to be the best compromise because you've got PPAs for anything that you need new versions of. But I'm generally happy with old versions of LibreOffice and that kind of thing. I don't need to be. I'm not one of these Arch users that has to have the latest of everything like you.
Okay. I wonder if things like Flatpaks and Snap packages, if they are successful, if they will change that. Because when you say PPAs, I cringe a little bit, to be honest with you. I'm like, oh,
really?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of PPAs anymore. I feel like it was a model that worked for limited distribution for testing software out of Launchpad and became a way to distribute software on the Ubuntu desktop. And it's so clunky. Like when you subscribe to like projects that are maintained by contributors and that contributor stops updating the PPA and you start getting 404s when you try to update your cache repo, it's super obnoxious.
Well, yeah, you've got to not go mad and be adding PPAs left, right, and center. But the odd thing, like Get iPlayer, for example, is something that I need a PPA for generally because I've just upgraded to 1604 on my main kind of media box, and it's working for now. But when that breaks, I'll have to add a PPA basically to make it continue to work. But that's one little command line program. You know, we're not talking about huge things like a desktop or whatever.
I agree. If you limit it to a couple of functional PPAs, one or two applications, you're generally fine. And if it's something that's pretty popular, if one PPA dies, you can often find a replacement. And maybe, for example, you want to subscribe and get the latest developments from Firefox.
Yeah, Firefox. Now, this week there was a blog post on Medium by Eric Petit, who is the head of marketing for Firefox. Now, the first sentence in this blog post is, I head up Firefox marketing, but I use Chrome every day.
Yeah, wow.
If I had a bell, I'd be dinging it, Chris. What? You're the head of marketing and you use Chrome every day and you're admitting that first up. Okay, well, let's just try and move past that. And what this blog post is about is browse against the machine, which is a bit of a... I don't know what the word for it is, really.
Yeah, it's their new campaign. It's their new campaign to try to make users aware of the differences between Firefox and Chrome, and that Chrome is connected to a larger machine. So you can browse against the machine by electing to use Firefox. And what Eric does here is he tries to build a case for it. He says Chrome has 4 times the market share of its nearest competitor, which is Firefox. He compares it to an 8-lane highway to the largest advertising company in the world. Google built it to maximize revenue from your searches and delivered display ads on millions of websites to monetize every single click. And today, there exists no meaningful safety valve on its market dominance. So he's trying to build this as like a war. This is the battle for the web. And so he's building Firefox up as this way to manage this, right? Today, Firefox is better than it was even a year ago. It's faster, it lags less, it hogs much less memory than Chrome, and in June we'll release a multi-process Firefox, putting us at performance parity with Chrome in most of the ways mere humans can actually perceive. It's because of this newfound internal confidence with Firefox that Mozilla has started to become more aggressive again. And they are announcing the Browsing Against the Machine campaign with a renewed posture for Firefox and a return to their roots.
So they've got these 5 points, right? The first one, Firefox is leaner, it takes up less memory, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's a technical argument. And then the other 4 are 4 different ways of saying we're not Chrome.
Yes.
That's their biggest argument for why you should use Firefox. We're not Chrome.
Their last part is we're Mozilla, not Google, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're actually, boy, it's weak. Firefox is not built by and for the largest advertising company in the world, so there's that. That's literally what they put in the sentence. Or Eric did, I guess. Yeah, there is a lot of bark here. There's definitely a lot of bark. I don't know where the bite's at exactly. It does land a little soft because he admits he uses Chrome every day. And he goes on to say that, it's fine. I use it because I am logged into different stuff, and I have some stuff in Chrome and I have some stuff in Firefox. But I feel like Eric here. So just like Mozilla was fighting the mobile battle with Firefox OS too late, Firefox is too late in responding to Chrome. It's the same story over again, unfortunately. But they're so caught up on this solid moral reason we need an open competitor for the web. They're so caught up on the technical achievements they've made with the improvements to Firefox that they're losing the fact that they themselves are Chrome users.
Yeah. And Andreas Gall, who was the former CTO of Mozilla, wrote a response to this. Well, not really a response, but kind of a follow-up article looking at the numbers of market share, and it does not look good for Firefox at all. You basically got 2 graphs, one going up and one going down, and Chrome is the one going up. And it doesn't really matter which way you look at it. People are not using Firefox anymore. There are a small number of us still out there, and I still use it. I'm using it right now to look at this blog post, but I am in the minority.
Yeah, he says at the macro level, it's safe to say that Chrome is eating the entire browser market. Everyone else, except for Safari, is getting obliterated. Safari is treading water as Apple sells iOS devices. If the 6-year trend holds, IE should be pretty much dead in 2 or 3 years. And Firefox is not faring much better, unfortunately. It's headed towards a 2 to 3% market share if the trends hold. Now, this, like Joe said, not only was he the CTO, but he was pretty much the head guy behind the Firefox OS project. So he really helped bring it to scale, and he's coming at this now with perspective of a failed project. And he says, look at our Firefox usage on Android, where mobile is now a huge part of the web usage. Firefox and Firefox Focus on Android have close to 0% market share.
Yeah, now I have Firefox on Android.
Me too, yeah.
I just use it for sites that I want to be logged into different accounts of, basically.
Yep. You're not using it for your daily driving.
No, I've tried, and it's just terrible.
And what does that do for Mozilla's agenda? That doesn't help them set the web agenda. That doesn't help them drive Firefox adoption, really. If they need daily users.
Yeah, which I still am on the desktop. I had to install Chrome the other day to use Hangouts, and I think that's a big factor here. To use any of Google's products, you basically need Chrome. For example, Maps basically doesn't work in Firefox anymore. It just crashes constantly. And you can't use Hangouts at all because the plugin isn't supported anymore. Docs and Drive seems to work reasonably well in Firefox. But if you're going to engage with Google's services, you basically need their browser. And I don't know if that is them deliberately making it not work in Firefox. But there's 2 ways you can look at it. Either the conspiracy that they've made it deliberately shit in Firefox, or the reality they don't care about Firefox and they don't bother testing it. As long as it works in Chrome, they're happy.
I speculate it's because it's using standards that Google has proposed, but the industry hasn't quite adopted yet. And eventually Firefox is sort of reluctantly drug into adopting the standards so that way they're compatible with the Google product. I don't even think, though, it's so much that Google has great services that work better under Chrome. I think that's probably definitely part of it for adoption in businesses and things like that. But like Andreas says here in the post, Firefox was really Mozilla's effort to drive the web by building a browser. And they were actually making pretty good headway on that until mobile exploded and the browser came baked into the OS at a whole new level. And they completely lost their leverage. And now the web, like you look at our own download stats for this show, Android far and away blows away the desktop downloads.
Yeah.
And in fact, iOS, if I recall, is still well above the actual desktop download statistics for this show.
Which is a bit of a surprise, isn't it? You'd think that there'd be a lot of people listening on Linux desktops, but apparently not.
They're listening on the go, Joe. They're listening on the go, and so they download on their mobile device, which is when they're checking the web on their mobile device, it's the same thing, and I think there's just a lot more of that happening now. Our stats have shown that transition, and Firefox has no hold there. It's really the dominant player is either going to be Safari or Chrome or whatever the built-in browser. And he makes a good point that strategy was working for Mozilla until that little fact came along. That's why they were so compelled to try Firefox OS. It was just too late.
Yeah. But even in enterprise, Gartner came out and said that Chrome is one of the biggest browsers in enterprise now. Most companies still use IE for some things, but they also have Chrome. And Firefox is just not going to be an option, is it? Think about it. If you were setting up someone else, I am setting up a laptop to give away to someone who doesn't really use much more than a browser. And so I'm sticking Ubuntu on there for him and Chrome, because I know if I give someone Chrome, every website's going to work, YouTube's going to work, everything's going to work perfectly. Whereas I could put Firefox on there and then have to support them.
Yeah, I know for myself, my transition to Chrome definitely was firm when it was the easiest way to get Netflix. And that's when I also transitioned fully from Chromium as well, is a couple of other sites I go to don't work well under Chromium, work fine under Chrome, like Spotify Web Player, for example. And so over the last year and a half, where I used to really be a dual browser Firefox Chrome guy, and now I'm Chrome and I'm Chrome private session, and I have stuff logged in, or personas even, and I really barely use Firefox anymore. And it makes me sad because I think it's a solid browser, and I'd love to see Mozilla around for the long haul, and I'd love to even see them be influential. But for the services I use on a literally daily basis, Chrome seems to be better. And I would argue, Joe, that it doesn't really matter. This battle is maybe over. But the war for other aspects of the internet and the web in general does rage on. And it seems possible for Firefox to continue on as a desktop browser doing just fine, and for Mozilla as a company to find new areas where somebody needs to blaze standards and blaze innovation where they've done successfully well in the past. They just essentially need to be ready for the next round of technology whenever that comes so they can be a player.
Well, let's hope so. So shall we end with a bit of positive news then?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see some progress for Coreboot, specifically coming out of Purism. They have Librem 13 version 2 and 15 version 3 working with Coreboot now.
Yeah, it's great to see that they've got a couple of machines now that they're going to ship in June, which are actually going to come with Coreboot, all being well, which was their original promise, wasn't it? Free software top to bottom.
And a genuine competitive differentiator.
Yeah, I was very skeptical, though, at first. I was very skeptical of Todd. He talks a good game, and I just thought it was absolutely impossible. But fair play to him. He's worked very hard on this and for a very long time, and they've managed to disable the management engine and stuff, and they seem to really be putting their money where their mouth is. These machines are pretty expensive for what they are, but it seems that money has been invested back into making them actually run Coreboot. And that's got to be better than some proprietary EFI.
The other thing that's cool to see is this sort of pushes the competition up a level in the market. So maybe other manufacturers might be more compelled to try to get this working on their systems. It gets more people using Coreboot, which is good. And it does give people who are seriously dedicated to this kind of system an option besides a 4-year-old ThinkPad.
Yeah, or a Chromebook, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Who wouldn't want that? I don't think the type of customer that wants a Librem is going to compromise with a Chromebook. Plus, who wants to pesky with all that weird Chromebook issues when you're trying to run Linux?
Yeah, which I have, unless you want. I can't remember what the disk drive. That's how long it's been since I've even used that machine.
There's Crouton, which you can use inside Chrome OS, which seems like not a bad way to go.
Yeah, I didn't even bother with that. I just went straight for Gallium OS, which is an XFCE-based distro. It's basically Ubuntu, but working on the Chromebook.
Yeah, Gallium. I remember that now. I completely forgot about Gallium. Crouton's nice if you don't want to mess with the whole thing and you predominantly use Chrome OS and just need to go to Ubuntu, but Gallium would be a great way to go if your daily driver is going to be Linux.
Yeah, and the battery on my Chromebook is so good that I used to use it for media consumption quite a lot. But yeah, I need to dig that out and start using it again, I think.
Consume some of that media weekly by going to linuxactionnews.com/subscribe for all the ways to get this show every single week. And you can contact us at linuxactionnews.com/contact for ways to get in touch.
Smooth, Chris. Real smooth.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You got to tune in every single Monday to get that smoothness for our weekly take on the latest in Linux and open source news. I'm Chris LAS.
I'm at Joe Ressington.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
See you later.